Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, August 19th City Council meeting. Monty, please call the roll.
Alderman Santee?
Here.
Alderman Glab?
Here.
Alderman McClatchy?
Here.
Alderwoman Massey?
Here.
Alderman Davis?
Here.
Alderman Cook? Alderwoman Miller?
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, public comment. This is for items that are not on the agenda this evening. Chris Moore, to the podium and state your name and address for public record. But before you do that, if you could hit that center button to turn the mic on. There you go. Thank you.
Chris Moore, 2136 Concord Drive in Henry. I have been a resident of this city for the past 15 years. My wife and I came here without any kids, and now we have 2 kids that we put through Landmark. And as you know, Landmark has decided to close at the end of the school year. And I'd like to thank the people that came out to support and gave support to the 400 parents, the 200 kids that will now be displaced. But we are working on it. Hopefully we can stop it, and you'll continue to hear the school bell at the beginning of the school year and at the end of the year. I know the mayor and I had a little tiff yesterday on Facebook. I kind of accused him of more concerned about building apartments and houses and not worrying about Landmark. In so many words, he told me that's not his responsibility, and I said, I know that, but at least get out there and do something. I'm not saying throw yourself in front of the bulldozer, but maybe mediate, maybe offer suggestions. That's all I'm asking. That's all that the 200 kids are asking. Landmark received one of the state's highest awards last year, and yet the superintendent wants to close it. All it is has nothing to do with the building. It all has to do with the principal who is leaving at the end of the year. She's retiring, and all they want to do is they don't want to find another principal. When I spoke to or commented on Facebook with the mayor, and we're going back and forth, and he told me that he doesn't really get into the school issues and stuff like this, but yet when I requested FOIA, the city told me they have no communication between the mayor and the school board or the superintendent. But yet when I asked FOIA from the school board, I have emails from the mayor. The mayor tells me I'm not getting into it with the school. They can spend their money the way they want it. But yet the superintendent offers him an invite to the new building that they spent $3 million on. There was communication as to what the school was doing for to get more bus drivers. For him to say that he doesn't get involved or anything like that is a bunch of BS. But yet he sits back here and does nothing well, at least most of you support us, the school, and that's what we want. So I'm hoping that some people have some suggestions on how we can keep this open. We've talked to the school board and say, hey, do you need, is it the building or whatever to keep the program going? Because Landmark is a year-round school. So they only get 6 weeks off for the summer. And they keep the same teacher for 2 years in a row. They call it looping. That's how they get all the test scores like that. That's how the kids come off the bus laughing, happy, whatnot. You never see them hit each other, bowling, or anything like that. Never. But we also credit that to the teachers who work there. And unfortunately, some left already, because there is no light at the tunnel for them. They can't take that chance. So we lost some good teachers in this district. So I'm hoping that we can be a little more vocal in trying to save this school to stay open. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to make a public comment? All right, moving on to consent agenda items 5A through 5F. I am looking to see if any council members are wanting to vote no on any of these items. If not, I will ask for a motion to approve 5A through 5F. Alderman McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. If there's nothing to be pulled, I will move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second? Alderman Santee.
I will second motion.
Thank you. Alderman Cook.
Part A. It's actually,
Okay. Do you just have questions? Is it just questions about it? Sure, and you'll have that opportunity. Do you plan on, is that okay? If we continue moving forward, but you can comment on it? Okay. All right, so we'll open up for discussion by City Council. Alderman Cook?
I just wanna, I talked to, Ross about, the vehicles in question. They came under budget, always looking for good deals and all that. Kept it in the community. I wanna give them praise. Bill, Ross, good praise and all that. Only a couple $100 over state bid and all. Good job, guys. I mean, I was looking into it and all that, and where you gotta travel for them and stuff like that, and you got them right here in your own backyard. I commend you guys. That's all I have to say.
Perfect, thank you. Any other comments? Alderman Bassi?
Yeah, I just want to put a correction to last month's minutes with the mayor's report when he apologized to me. The only thing that's missing from the minutes that I would like added is that after reviewing the tapes, Alderwoman Bassi was in fact against eminent domain. So I want that corrected, please.
Santi?
So that's up to all of you to vote on. If they're all okay with that, that would be part of the motion to accept your corrections.
Okay, so do I make a motion
So
to...
there'd be, you would have to amend that.
I'll amend it.
Alderman Santee, you'll amend it?
I'll amend my second.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, so is it corrected then?
It will be corrected, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Glenn?
I just want to state the fact that I'm rarely, very rarely ever bidding on or voting on when we don't do competitive bids out there. But however, I understand the situation as of late with the vehicles and everything else, and therefore I can understand the situation here. But I just wanted to mention the fact that I rarely ever support not going out for bid on things.
Thank you. Alderman Cook?
I agree with Alderman Glad that I don't like it unless you go out for bids and all that, but I understand the problems getting these vehicles, you know, and they're right here in our backyard. So I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments by council? See none? Monty, please call the roll.
Alderman McClatchy?
Yes.
Alderman Santee?
Yes.
Alderman Glab?
Yes.
Alderwoman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Davis?
Yes.
Alderman Cook?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Next item on the agenda is 6A is Don Subs Liquor and Gaming. Looking for a motion to approve a Class B liquor license and video gaming license to Don Subs located at 323 Front Street, and to pass an ordinance amending Title IV, Chapter 2, Alcoholic Liquor, Section 6, License Classification and Fees, Approval Authority, Limitation on Number of Licenses, and Title IV, Chapter 6, Video Gaming Terminals, editing Section 4-6-8, Subsection A, Number of Licenses of the City of McHenry Code. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve. Alderman Miller?
I would like to make that motion to approve everything you just said about Don Sub Liquor and Gaming.
Thank you. Second? Alderman Santee?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Just so you know, the applicants are here this evening, so if you have any questions for them, but at this time, I'll open up for discussion by City Council. Alderman Glenn?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, basically, this does just put it back to the situation as to where they were before, correct? With
That's
that
correct.
same,
Yep.
so really there's nothing
No-
changed?
no changes.
They've changed their mind, I'm sure it's a business decision, and that's fine with me.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments by council? All right. Monty, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Miller?
Yes.
Alderman Santee?
Yes.
Alderman Cook?
Yes.
Alderman Davis?
Yes.
Alderwoman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman McClatchy?
Yes.
Alderman Glab?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Next, congratulations again. If you have any questions, give us a shout, okay? We definitely will. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 6B is a car meetup ordinance. Approve a car meetup ordinance as presented, amending the following. 1, Title 6, Public Safety, Chapter 5. Title 6, Public Safety, Chapter 8. Title 7, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 4. Title 7, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 10. I'm looking for a motion to approve as presented. Alderman Miller?
I will make the motion to approve a car meetup, or really non-meetup, ordinance as presented.
Thank you. Second? Alderman Cook?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Chief, is there anything you wanted to add before we, all right. Any discussion by City Council? Alderman Glenn?
Yeah, just on the car meetup part, as far as the fines go, I believe it's $50 if I remember right. Is that per incident or is that per vehicle with the incident? In other words, if it's a group of 6 or 8 cars, is that per car or is that just?
It would depend on the changes here. One of them's a parking violation, so those are $25 fines associated with each individual vehicle that would be parked there illegally. And then if you fail to get a permit for a gathering, those would be $50 fines that would be issued to the individual people at that gathering as well.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Massey?
On page 58 of the package, the certification, just a request, you have the mayor and the aldermen of McHenry. Can you change it to mayor and alder people, person? That's all. Thank you.
Alderman Cook?
Chief, does this, is there a certain number of cars that would be considered?
Bless you.
Yeah, the ordinance, I think, identifies it's 3 or more that are gathering.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Miller?
Thank you, Chief, for bringing this forward. I know it's been a growing nuisance in our community. You and I have spoken about this a couple times. So on the back end, we see a meetup. I'm assuming that you're monitoring frequent flyers and people who create the meetups more than once or twice, or as you're giving them citations if they don't have a permit to do this. I'm assuming there's a monitoring of the people who are doing this?
Well, right now, we monitor the gatherings when they happen, either through, just watching them, or we go there for calls for service, which is part of the reason why we're here today. just police resources trying to deal with an issue that's not providing any service or helping any of our businesses in our community. But yes, if we did write citations at this passed tonight, we would have, those would be in our record management system. We would be able to track the people that we have contact with as well through that process.
Through your intergovernment conversations, does this seem to be the same group of individuals going from community to community and just doing nightly meetups, or what is your experience, or what can you share about this experience?
Well, what we can share is that we see these meetups occur in our town on multiple days out of the week. The people that are engaged in these meetups are not, the vast majority of them are not from our community. They're not visiting or utilizing our businesses, whether or not they're parked in our municipal lots or if they're parked in private parking lots. They're rather just using those locations to meet up. And what we see when those people get together is we see, just like we put in the supplement, we see issues with conflicts for other people that have already planned and approved events like Monday night car shows, and then we see criminal activity, anywhere from hit and run car accidents to unlawful use of weapons that change the safety of our community. So,
do you think there's enough teeth in the ordinance?
I do. I think this is an excellent start to see if we can't combat this. So.
Perfect, thank you.
Alderman Bessie?
One more question. Do you see this weekly, or how often?
Multiple times a week.
Multiple times a week?
Yes.
Roughly what time?
All times.
It
in the
doesn't
evenings.
matter.
Mostly anytime after 4 o'clock in the evenings. Correct.
Okay. And approximately how many cars?
Anywhere from 10 to 40.
Oh, it's a lot.
Yep.
Like Alderwoman Miller said, is this strong enough?
Yeah, this is a good start for us. We want to make sure that we're doing our very best to work with, that there are part of the people that go to these gatherings that we don't have any issues with, and they're communicate with us, and we want to work with people the very best that we can. But we don't want to see the problems that come with these type of gatherings, so we want to be able to enforce that.
Thank you for doing this.
Alderman Cook?
Does this include, like Peterson Park? Does this include like East Beach or any other, like out in McHenry Shores and all that? If they show up at the park and all that, is that?
Sure. Part of the amendments we're making would be covered under parking lots or locations as well, gatherings and meetups. If they didn't have it, they would have to apply for a permit with the city if they wanted to have a planned meetup. And then the city would issue, they'd have to pay that permit, and the city would have to issue that permit. And then if they became a nuisance, then we would enforce them under the nuisance ordinance that we're proposing tonight. Then the third element, which was the downtown parking element, that would not apply to the parks like East Beach or West Beach, because those would be specific to the municipal parking locations within Riverside Drive, Main Street, and Green Street. Because we see that problem regularly at the Green Street lot now.
I guess what I was asking, like at Peterson Park over there off of Oak Street, if they were to, who's playing pickleball, who's doing basketball, even though they're not doing any of it, they're just meeting up. I mean, is that?
Correct. If 3 or more were utilizing that location to meet up, and they weren't utilizing the property, we could take enforcement action with these amendments.
Thanks.
Yes.
Alderman Miller?
So when I read this, I read something about impounding cars. Do we actually impound cars?
Just for specific vehicle or traffic-related offenses. We do that now. We impound cars. What this does is if the offense is related to what was cited in the proposal for you, that fine for what would be normally a $500 impound fee would increase to $1,000. And that's for people that are drag racing, reckless driving. This is the type of behavior we see associated with this.
I think you should deputize all of us so that we could take crazy drivers off the street and impound their cars. But that's just my personal feeling. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments by council? Monty, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Miller?
Yes.
Alderman Cook?
Yes.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman Glab,
Yes.
Alderman McClatchy.
Yes.
Alderwoman Bassie.
Yes.
Alderman Davis.
Yes.
Thank you, Council. Next item on the agenda is the Rise Up Foundation concert for 2025. Looking for a motion to grant the Rise Up Foundation use of Peterson Park to set up, host, and clean up for a benefit concert for Thursday, September 11th, 2025 through Saturday, September 13th, 2025. 2 special event liquor license for the sale of beer, wine, and malt liquor with drinks, ticket sales to cease 30 minutes prior to park closure, and 3, 100% reduction in charges for city services incurred as a result of this event. I am looking for a motion to approve. Alderman Miller?
I will make the motion to approve the request from the Rise Up Foundation as presented.
Thank you. Second? Alderman Davis?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion by City Council? Alderman Cook?
The cleanup, that means the city is gonna go in there and clean up after these guys, or what?
They have a pretty extensive volunteer group that comes in and helps out. We do help manage garbage throughout the event with our, obviously as the sole benefactor for the entire event. You know, and I think the kind of the proof is in the pudding, I guess, as they say, with what we've received, over $600,000 from this event. And that doesn't count this year, but we'll have our staff on hand, but they have an extensive volunteer group that comes in to really clean up, reset the grounds, reset their chairs. That's all on their volunteer team. So, other than manning garbages and watching bathrooms, those type of things, that's primarily what our guys will be responsible for.
So, yeah, so we have about 30 people, Friday morning, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning that comes and cleans up. Even the porta potties, we have a separate cleaning service that handles all the porta potties, and all that stuff. So, you know, for the most part, it's more of the big blower on the grounds to push all the cups to one area, other than that, and then garbage during the event, which we also have our own volunteers participating in that as well.
So are these 8-hour days for these 30 people? Is it 10 one day?
8 to noon.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 to noon. And then that's resetting the park and getting it ready for the show that's 5 hours later.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman McClatchy?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor for putting this together. You raise money for good causes for the city. My questions are, has it always been 11 o'clock?
Yes, yes it has.
Chief, has there ever been complaints about the music? I feel like this is Groundhog Day. We just talked about this at the last meeting, but as far as noise?
No, we've pretty much modeled the Fiesta Day hours for this. So typically the ticket sales end at 10:30, and then at 10:45 they have to stop serving all alcohol, and we start moving them out of the park.
I guess what I meant, was there any complaints from residents?
Not that I'm aware
Like
of.
Mill Creek,
Not that came to
Lakeland
the police.
Park?
Not that came to the police department, no. Not that I'm aware
The
of.
one complaint we did have is doing fireworks at 11 p.m. one night in 22, I think. Was that in 22 or 21?
Yes, the first
So
year
we're
of
not doing
fireworks.
fireworks. But that was the only complaint that I heard.
Yeah, which the fireworks are no longer a component of the show.
Yeah.
And haven't been.
Alderman Bassie?
Thanks. Chief, do you keep detailed log of any noise complaints for events? I'm not just saying the Rise Foundation. I'm saying any
Detailed
of our
logs, no. If
outlets.
somebody calls and actually files a complaint on noise, a report number is issued, and that's logged in our rec management system like all police reports.
Okay. In the last couple of years, you know, we've had an increase in outdoor concerts. I'll sit up so you can hear me.
Okay. Nah, I'm
Okay.
good ears over here.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just want to make sure, I just want to know if there's a detail log, has noise complaints increased, they're just leveled off the same, or we're just not even getting any?
Yeah, I would have to go back. So we do an after-action report internally for any festival that we participate in. And we would document if we had complaints that came through with that. I don't recall getting anything like that. We normally will get complaints through the years, and I you know, when it comes to music and things like that, whether or not it's Fiesta Days, primarily is the ones that I can recall. Occasionally from somebody that might live on Lakewood, but I don't have any. We don't have a repeat type complaint or an issue that from any of the festivals that I'm aware of, that happen at Peterson Park. I don't know if Director Hobson gets anything differently, but from us, no.
Okay.
The fireworks are our biggest complaint, and most of the time they're not from us, they're from everybody else doing them everywhere else in town on the same day that we're hosting our fireworks, and those are our biggest complaints.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Glab?
Yeah, number one, we're talking about, taking and, allowing, this concert to go on with no restriction as far as sound. I mean, I hear these concerts all the way very, how would you put it, very clearly at my residence, and I'm halfway through the city from Peterson Park. And I tend to wonder, I mean, it doesn't meet the sound ordinances of the city. Why aren't we doing a variance on this as well as far as the sound? Because technically, after 10 o'clock, I think, or whatever time it is, once it goes past 70 feet past the property line, it should be curtailed, correct? I mean, it doesn't, it...
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock, so.
Okay, so in other words, it's legal all the way till 11 o'clock, no matter how loud it gets, unless it becomes a nuisance, and... of course,
Yeah.
On something like this, it is
Right.
a nuisance.
And-
Okay,
and-
I just want to clarify that. And the other thing, you know, we're talking about waiving the fees, and what approximately is the amount of city service charges that we are reducing? You know, to say 100% reduction of the charges, what are the charges? I mean, you know, how many dollars are we talking? What is it going to cost the city to reduce, you know, the charges on that?
As an estimate, like for yesterday,
I'm not saying exact dollar.
sure, as an estimate for yesterday, and I'll say this, that they typically ask for that 50% reduction. We've granted them every year. So they don't, you know, whether it's McHenry Rotary Club or McHenry Chamber of Commerce, we charge them 50% of their fees. The entire fee structure for like a 3-day festival is usually probably around $20,000. So our fees to the Chamber of Commerce are roughly $10,000, based on council approval of reduction of fees by 50%. But if it was 100% charges for a 3-day festival, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for the Chamber of Commerce, or Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, it's in that neighborhood of $20,000.
Okay.
Full
And
charge.
Is that including the police department?
The police
okay.
department is the bulk of the charges.
That's it all?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments by council? Anyone from the public that'd like to make a public comment? Monty, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Miller,
Yes.
Alderman Davis,
Yes.
Alderman Cook,
Yes.
Alderwoman Bassie,
Yes.
Alderman Glab,
Yes.
Alderman Sant.
Yes.
Did I skip Alderman McClatchy?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you, council. Next item on the agenda is discussion item 7A is pavement management analysis. Director Wirtz, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. A few meetings ago, council had directed me, or asked for some information about a road program, and then also directed me to look into a revised scope for a pavement condition assessment, from our prior one, which I did, and I believe you all have the information in your packets. The revised one was $28,000 less than the original. So I guess ultimately we're here tonight to have a discussion if this is something that council would like to move forward with doing, or not, before I bring it back to council on an actual agenda supplement.
Alderman Miller.
Thank you, Director Wirtz. We've had conversation about this. I feel it is essential to have a strategic plan in place, and I think the strategic plan when it comes to road maintenance and repair is to have a third-party independent analysis. So, thank you for going out and speaking with the engineering firm that provided us the last study. It has been 5 years since our last study. I believe that study was done in 2019, if I'm correct. We've done a substantial amount of repair and resurfacing since then, more than we expected to do, from found money and just reallocating resources. So I think for accountability and objectivity, having this report done gives us direction on how to schedule out or plan out the future of road repair. I think it's essential. I'm glad to see it back on the agenda, and I strongly support having it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Santee?
On, let's see, page 66, Steve, bullet point 5. It says reduce thickness of asphalt removal to 1.5 if possible. I guess we discussed this, but I guess I'd like an explanation in public in regards to when and if that would occur, because I know depending on when the roads were originally constructed, you know, they may not have too much of an underlay and some may have a better one.
That's correct. When we do the course, you know, after we decide our program, we have, you know, we do core samples in each road, and, you know, based on the core samples, we decide whether or not it needs to be full depth replacement, or if it's possible just to remove the wearing surface, which is 1.5 inches of surface, and then relay that and get the life back out of the road.
Okay, and another, not a concern, but just I want to make sure that it makes sense in this. Our staff is going to be doing ADA ramps and where we can save on in-house engineering also. We're not slowing down the process of the actual roads being rebuilt by us doing like those sidewalks and ADA ramp areas, are we?
No, we're doing next year's right now, so they're done before spring, before we even bid it out.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I understood that too. No further questions for me. Thanks.
Yep. Alderman Bassi?
Thank you. Steve, I just want to confirm that the price, originally you came to us and it was about $90,000.
I believe it was 83,000 something. Is it like 83,400?
Am I looking at it correctly now that it is 55,600?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Glenn?
Yeah, on that reduction, what are we reducing as far as, what they are doing for us, for that money?
We cut out the big thing, like where they do the analysis and give us this bit, you know, a lot more information. We basically cut it down to where we're just getting roads rated, and they will give us the rating of the roads, and then we can take the information from there and plug it into what we have. Versus, you remember the last time you had this, you had a lot more information with the analysis of all the roads and the you know, how we would implement the program ourselves. We can decide how we want to implement it. Last time they gave us a big process on how to implement it, how they felt we should do it. And
again,
this will let us choose that.
How they decided we do it, now the city council decides to do it, I think should be, decided here before we move forward, and that's the fact that the city council should discuss this in a, considering we don't have committees any longer, then we need a committee of the whole to discuss the whole project with ratings and with decisions of what roads are being done and why, rather than us just taking and, oh, well, this is the list this year, that's what this company tells us we need to do. Because, again, like I mentioned last time, and that's the fact that there are roads, and the last time we did the study, what wasn't taken into consideration is the use of those roads and how many people use roads. I mean, if we've got major collector roads within the subdivisions, those should be taken care of before the out-of-the-way small side street that doesn't get that much traffic. We've got to do the most for the most residents that have the use of those roads, and that's why I fought for Kensington as hard as I did. There are other roads, you know, that again are not considered right off of the main roads. Water's Edge is another good one, because everybody that comes over the bridge, half of them come down there to either go to the school or up to 120, and
Water's Edge is a good example why I believe that we should redo this, because Water's Edge has deteriorated differently over the last 5 years than some other roads. In 2019, it was rated as a 42, I believe, and right now next year I believe we're working on 33s and 34s. So if we just went worst to first, Water's Edge is years away from being repaved.
Well, like I say, I think more than anything else, I can see where the ratings can come to you and you bring it forward to the council, but I think we need to have a committee of the whole meeting to discuss the road program, and, I will still say every time we talk about roads is we need more money for the roads. Somehow we've got to find more money because, again, we had, Leo Pardo, was it? That came in, years back, they were the first ones, to talk about the roads, and, they said, yeah, we spend $2 million a year on roads, a little over 2.2 million, I think it was, and again, I'm going by memory, and 7 years later, we're right back to where we were. And yes, we are paving roads, but again, what's happening to the roads that were done 7, 8 years ago, and how much longer before we're gonna have to look at them? How long before we catch up with our entire city and find that the back roads are way behind already? So, again, I thought we were on the right track a few years back, when we were gonna be spending $3.5 to $4 million, and unfortunately, there's no grant money and everything else that we had at that time. But then we need to find the other money, and, like I said, we need to, and I'm not saying it's gonna be for next year, but somehow we need to find that money, and I'll keep bringing it up every time. Thank you.
And I've stated this before, I don't think of it as dollars, I think of it as how many miles a year that we do. If we do 6.5 miles a year, we will redo every road in 20 years. I don't know if there's any other towns that can redo, or that are doing every road in 20 years. So to me, it's about mileage versus money.
Well, let's not compare everybody, everybody else, let's compare.
I'm just saying I'm saying a 20-year,
Yeah.
if you can redo all your roads in 20 years and continue that,
Oh.
I think you're winning. I
agree.
don't know how you can do better than that.
Well, I take a look at some of our roads that were done 20 years ago, and, they're definitely overdue, we get, some roads, that were done, probably when the original subdivisions went in, are still in fairly good shape. I don't push for those because I know that, I've seen roads that were done 20 years ago, and they're in some pretty sad shape, and, a lot of potholes, and cracks and whatnot, and, why would you tear a road that, is in good shape? Because evidently something was done right with that road, the fact that it hasn't dissipated like a lot of the others have, and, that's why I think, to some extent, the council members need to be a little bit more involved than they have in the last few years as far as, what we're doing with the roads, so that, and I still say that, we still need more money for the road program.
Alderman McClatchy, go ahead.
Thank you. When this came up in February, I was for it, and I'm still for it. I think having a third-party rate our roads, I think it's the best way to go. And $30,000 reduction, I'm even more for it.
Thank you. Alderman Davis?
No, I'm all for it. I think we need to get the updated ratings so that we know what we're, working with and stuff like that, so, thank you for getting, really what we need rather than the, what they really wanted to give us, which was the full report, so.
Right. I think we have direction. We're good? Okay.
Just one other thing.
Sure.
With this, survey, is that the survey, the last, 4 or 5 years of roads as
Yes,
well?
they're gonna do all 130 miles.
Okay, well, I think it's, over, again, maybe we could save some money if they didn't do those, considering they just got done, but then if nothing else, we need to have a report, if you don't mind, as far as how those roads are rated, considering they were done in the last 4 or 5 years, to see how well, these roads are being done when they're being done. I mean,
100%.
I'll give you a good example, is Dartmoor, on the west side of the bridge, brand new subdivision, and I think it was less than 12 or 14 years later, I mean, it was all crumbling and whatnot.
We talking about the Legend Lake side?
Yes.
Well,
not Legend Lakes as much as...
The Boone Creek side, that was, yeah, I believe that was paved in 2018.
And a lot had to do with the fact that, the creek was flooding, back, just a couple of years after that subdivision started, with all those 100-year storms we had and everything else. But it's still the fact that it did not last, as long as it probably should have, so...
Then that'll be a good example of what it's looked like 5 to 7 years later. I forget
That's why I
exactly.
say, you know, if we're gonna do all the roads, then we need to know those last 4 or 5 years, how well is that pavement holding up?
Agreed.
Alderman Sandy?
Yeah, when we do all the roads, whether they're in very good condition or very poor, we'll get a rating number for all the roads.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, good. I want to make sure that we have that, you know, that might show some roads deteriorating sooner than possible, or show that some are actually, you know, staying stronger than others over a few more years. And the other item, I want to move forward, but the other item is sure, I don't think there's anybody who's going to argue about more money for roads. You know, we, by all means, you know, staff can look into this. We can make suggestions to staff. That's, you know, there's always any kind of ideas are available. Some of it is possibly could cost our citizens some money, but we can always look at different avenues for revenue. But I think we all agree that we have it. We'd love to put more money into roads. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davis?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Alderman McGlabb's comment that I like the idea of doing all the roads, and you touched on this at the end, but your first comment was, oh, we shouldn't do it, save the money. I think it's imperative because now we know how the roads are deteriorating, how quickly, as opposed to the ones that were done 10 years ago. So I think it's imperative that we do the ones that we did to see that how quickly they are. So is it going to be 20 years? Is it going to be 15 years? Is it going to be 10 years? You know, is it going to be 30 years? You could see that deterioration and do that, so.
Alderman Bessie?
Carolyn, where's the money coming from?
I can answer that. It was budgeted in our operational budget.
In Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. I always like to know where it's coming from. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is 7B, Parks and Recreation Master Plan Presentation and Discussion. Director Hobson?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to be in front of you and to speak with you about our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We've done this process, began this process back in probably May of 2023, actually. During that time, we started our inventory process, and I don't want to steal too much of Bridget's thunder, but inventory and analysis, as well as some of our public input was a significant portion, which I'm sure you've been able to read through this information here. We got our staff, we had a community outreach as well, and we got to the point where we need to bring this information to you. We've dealt with a lot of things over the course of probably the last 7 months, from a change in leadership to some of the heavier items that we've had on our plate here from Shodine Development, as well as our own comp plan, our citywide comp plan. And so fitting this meeting into that has been a little bit of a challenge, and I appreciate the patience of Hitchcock Design Group to be able to present this information. But we're at a point when we are very excited to take the next step, present this information to you, gather your input to be included in this plan, and continue to move it forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Bridget Dietrich with Hitchcock Design Group.
Great. Thank you, Bill, and thank you all for having us here tonight. Really appreciate the opportunity to share the progress we've made so far and eventually talk about next steps with you all. So we provided some information in your packet that I believe many of you have had a chance to reread in advance. We'll go through our presentation at a pretty high level today, but please at any point, if there's information you'd like to dive deeper into or have questions on, just stop me and we can talk through these items as they come up on the screen. In addition to myself, Bridget Dietrich from Hitchcock Design Group, I'm also joined by Max Gettler, who will be helping me later in the presentation. We're with Hitchcock Design Group, landscape architecture and landscape planning firm. Also on our team, who are not here tonight but are working behind the scenes, are FGM architects who have been able to complete a very detailed assessment of the rec center and are looking into some of the other facility properties throughout the city, and we'll speak to those later. So tonight we're going to take you through the planning process on the whole and dive deep into the inventory analysis and connect steps, which we have gone through to date. We'll talk a little bit about what's upcoming, and then we'll lead you through the same workshop that we've done with staff and community to get the department head and the alderman and mayor input, as well as the last step of our connect phase. So as we move into the first section of the process, we look at the process in 5 pieces. Those first 2 phases, analyze and connect, are stacked on top of each other because we do these concurrently. These are our data gathering portions of the project where we really dive deep into what the city provides to its citizens and what's working well, what isn't working well, and we have the opportunity to compare you against national, state, and some peer community groups. The other piece of that is the connect side of things, which is where we reach out to your community, the staff, and yourselves to find out what topics are top of mind, what are we doing really well, and what might be opportunities to improve. These 2 steps are really preliminary in data gathering. We really don't draw a lot of conclusions in these first 2 stages. We're really just here to learn more about the community, and then we move from these into the envision phase, which really starts right after tonight. And that envision phase is where we start to look at all of the pieces, all of the information we've heard, look for those points of intersection and commonality where we start to see needs rise to the top, and generate a list of some potential strategies and goals that could be accomplished. And once we have that, we work with staff. We work through those items with staff to make sure that everything is in alignment with the city's mission and vision and is achievable and desirable. Then we get down to prioritizing that over the next 5 to 10 year calendar. And within that envision and prioritize steps, we'll come before you once again to just check that we're still on track and we're still aligning with what the community needs are at that step of the process. And that brings us to the final stage, which is our implement stage, where we summarize all of our findings, all of our process to date in one public report, and that summarizes all of the findings as well as the objectives and the recommendations to move forward. So with that, we're going to dive right into the analysis phase, and we'll go through these again very quick. Please just let me know if you'd like to pause. The first thing we look at with the community is the overall context. So the city of McHenry itself, its boundaries as outlined in those that black shape. Specifically for parks and recreation, we look at the city open spaces shown in dark green, but we also look at the open spaces provided by us, which you can see in those lighter green tones, as well as who our immediate neighbors are, other agencies, as well as county-owned properties. And then we dive a little bit deeper on our next slide. We also look at the demographics of the community. So we look at this to both determine who's living in the community. We look at total population, if there's growth or decline, to determine how that might impact future needs. We also look at family makeups, household age, and as we move through, we'll consider a couple other factors, if you don't mind to go into the next slide. Age is especially important when we consider programming and the type of amenities that are being offered, providing amenities that meet needs of multiple different groups within the community. One thing of note within McHenry that we find is very, very common in the greater Chicago area is a lot of population who's aging in place. People are getting older into that active adult and senior range, but they're staying in their communities. And so understanding that that is becoming a bigger and bigger demographic and continuing to trend as we look not just from the 2010 census, but the 2023 projections and forward, knowing that these population groups are going to continue to grow and evolve helps us plan for the future. Moving right along, we do look at demographics as well with race and ethnicity, just trying to understand again where the diversity in the community is, as well as if there's any significant cultural considerations that should be taken into account. I know one question we get quite commonly is why Hispanic is pulled off to the side, so just to address that very quickly. Hispanic is a place of origin, not necessarily a race. This is how the U.S. Census tracks this information, so that's how we do it as well. Just to note that you could consider yourself to be white and Hispanic, black and Hispanic, etc. So we do keep those metrics separate just to be in alignment with how the census pulls their own information. And finally, we get into income distribution. So once again, understanding what the needs of the community might be or where there might be some opportunity to adjust some of the services depending on community finance. We'll continue straight through and we'll get into the parks themselves. So when we do the inventory of the physical assets of the community. We look at the location of the parks and the facilities, their classifications, what amenities are offered, and the actual size of each of these items. As we move into the location, we dive deep into the actual inventory of the community itself, zooming into those community boundaries to determine what sites, just like we saw on the context map, are owned by the city for recreation purposes, shown in dark green. You'll also notice we have some additional properties shown with some hatches, some purple or some yellow. These are properties that are either owned by the city but are leased back. These are typically properties that are still being used for farming but are held by the city and could potentially change use in the future. And we also have a small property that is actually owned by others but is being used for city recreation, which would be the dog park. And as I mentioned earlier, we do look at other potential recreation providers in your community as well, to not just understand what the department alone does, but who might also be providing similar services within your community. And so that includes parks offered by other agencies that might be outside your boundaries but in close proximity, as well as the school properties, because we know that outside of school hours, the public might be able to access those amenities, as well as during school hours, those students are probably getting some sort of recreation during their educational day. And from there, we like to categorize the parks. So this is where I'll throw my first acronym at you. We go off of the National Recreation and Parks Association to guide the classifications of parks. And so there's three classifications called active parks. These are what you might think of as your traditional park spaces that are much more self-driven, recreation focused. Your smallest unit is going to be your mini park, which is a very localized, very neighborhood-driven usage. It's going to have your fewest variety of activities, and is going to mostly be used by residents in immediate proximity for their daily recreation needs. The next level up in that active park use is your neighborhood park. These are slightly larger locations that might service an entire neighborhood, but are still going to be relatively localized. Typically for both neighborhood and mini parks, we expect that people are generally walking to these destinations, and that and that's why we generally see them as being more of a immediate neighbors or immediate community classification. Then the final classification of active parks are going to be your community parks. These parks are your regional draws. These are going to be your larger parks that have the most variety of amenities. And we typically see that these parks are utilized by members across your community regardless of distance, because they have that extra quantity or variety of services that attract people to these locations. And so we look at them as a drive-to or a destination within the community. And those are our 3 units of active park spaces. But we know that there are other land uses within the city. Natural areas are just as they sound, areas that are predominantly allocated for natural land conservation, ecological projects. They might have some of what we call passive recreation, such as trails, shelters, other items that are relatively low impact and pretty low usage, but because the key component here is conservation. We also have special use parks. These are parks that are really focused on a single specialized use. So these might be things like a aquatic center or a golf course, items that are much more single focused and might even have a revenue generating component to them. Trails, corridors, and linear parks, I believe, are fairly straightforward, just your connectors that connect your larger spaces, bikeways, for example. And the final category that does not come from NRPA is just an undeveloped park. So this is land that might be held, perhaps just for future development, perhaps just to hold open, but does not have any recreation use currently assigned to it. And so as we look at your individual parks, on the next slide, I'm not going to go into each of these, but we've gone through, confirmed each of these with staff, and looked along the left-hand side at each of the parks and put them in the various categories where we feel they best suit. So the mini parks, once again, are going to be your smallest land sizes and your most limited to amenities, working all the way up on this page to the community parks. And these are all of your active parks. In addition to the park classifications themselves, we look at their total acreage, both owned and leased. And then we look at all of the amenities present within the park. And as we move into the next page, you'll see we also do this, if you look in your packet, you'll see that we also do this with those other park classifications as well. So when we look at your park system holistically, we see that active parks, so just your mini neighborhood and community park, has a total of 288 acres. Now, we're able to compare this, once again, to NRPA. They have a database called Park Metrics, which relies on national reporting from agencies who provide recreation services from all over the country, which then is compiled into recommendations and benchmarks so you can compare to other providers of similar services. So compared to that benchmark, there's actually a recommendation for a community of your size. It's a calculation per 1,000 residents of 278 acres, which when looking, and this is only for active park recreation. So when comparing your services to that, you are just barely over that recommendation by about 10 acres. However, we know that's not the only type of land you provide, so when we look at the entire system, not just those active uses, but all the additional land, and compare your total acreages to just what NRPA recommends, which is only those active parks, you see that we actually are quite above that recommended minimum. And from here, we're able to do several more analyses. So we'll look at the analysis of the acreage itself, its distribution within your community, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into the amenities that actually exist on those properties. So moving into the next slide with the acreage. This is really what we've just talked about on the previous slide, comparing how the NRPA recommends that the active park acreage is broken down versus how it compares to City of McHenry. As you can see, you're a little bit under in mini park and neighborhood, but make up the difference in that community park category. We also can just see the comparison of those active park versus the non-active park acreage being close to a 50-50 split on the table to the far right. Park Metrics also includes, in addition to looking at national metrics and making recommendations, they also have a searchable database. And this is where we're able to kind of check the results of McHenry against similar communities. In this case, looking at the population of the city, we've compared you to other Midwest communities with populations between 25,000 and 35,000, just to see how you compare to some others who provide similar services in a similar region of the country. So compared to the quantity of parks, the median of Park Metrics is 22.5 versus the 42 provided by the city. Total acres maintained is 338 for the median compared to the 591 from the city. And when you compare that to the actual breakdown per population using that acres per 1,000 residents served, we're about 12.3 for the median compared to the 21.3 acres provided by the city. And so really what that tells us is there's a lot of land and a lot of opportunity available within the community. But the next step of that is the actual geographic distribution. So not just is it available, but where is it available and how might people be accessing it. So this next map just takes your community and assigns planning areas. So these planning areas are what we consider barriers to pedestrian recreation. These might be roads that have high numbers of lanes of traffic or high speed limits. They could also be areas that don't have sidewalks or have few or very far spaced crosswalks where people may not be able or willing to walk to find those crossing points. And it could even be something like the river if there's not a bridge connection. That said, there are a few areas where there are exceptions to those rules, and you'll see those marked by an asterisk, where they're largely barriers, but there might be a few exceptions where that access might bleed through, and people who are closer geographically to that point might be more willing to cross at that. But people, as they get farther away from that point, might be less willing or less able to access it. And what we do with this is actually take each of our park classifications and determine where we think people might be reaching them from. So using those NRPA recommendations for size and travel distance, we do this analysis for all levels of active park service. So for mini parks, we look not just at the mini parks alone, but also the neighborhood and community. Because if you have access to a bigger park within the recommended distance, then we think it's very reasonable and expected that a resident might go to that larger park for their smaller service needs. So for mini park service, this is considered a smaller walk-to destination. They typically are accessed by pedestrian or bicycle, but they typically don't have parking lots or lots of ability to accommodate large groups. So we cut off these service areas in orange at those planning areas because that's where we don't expect people to be accessing them from. We are also able to apply population estimates to each of these locations so that when we look at our map, we can see not just visually in the orange where these park service service is concentrated, but also understand the percent of people served. And so when we look at mini park access throughout the community, we're seeing that just a little bit over 40% of residents are served by your current offerings. And we do the same exercise on the next slide for neighborhood parks as well. It's just a slightly bigger surface area because there's more amenities and a little bit more to draw people to that, so we use the half-mile radius to determine that. But we are still expecting that these are largely walk-to destinations, so we are still showing that access is likely not going to be crossing these planning area lines. As we move into the next slide, which is the community park, these are considered drive-to destinations and regional draws, so we no longer cut these boundaries and these access areas off at our planning areas because we expect people are willing to travel forward or utilize a vehicle and the subsequent parking and other access provided to get to these larger, more diverse use parks. And finally, the last analysis we do for these is overlay all of these, because while it's great to say it's great to look at them individually, ultimately we're looking at your system as a whole and we want to understand what service is provided. And so when we overlay each of these mini neighborhood and community parks on top of each other, we're looking at a total community service within the expected travel distance of at least one active park being in the low 80s for the community. And as we look across the map, we can see both visually where there are some gaps in service, as well as in your packet, you'll have seen some exact numbers applied to some planning areas. So Planning Area 2, Planning Area 11, and Planning Area 9 all have greater populations of residents. And so as we begin to take into our next steps after tonight, we might begin looking at how some of those residents' needs might be met. The other item that we'll start to look forward to after tonight is who else might be meeting some of those needs. So we know that there are parks by others, that there are school properties available. So one of the next steps we'll be taking as we look at these results is not just what's currently available from the city, but also what schools might be meeting some of those residents' needs, or perhaps the veterans ball fields might be serving some of your community as well. And so that helps us understand not just where your gaps are, but where gaps might exist from others, and allows us to determine if there might be potential partnerships or potentially may not be as much of a need as initially appears, because we don't necessarily want you to be competing. From there, we look at the amenities themselves. We use two metrics to compare against. These are our standard benchmarks, and comparing you against these allows us to get a good understanding for common recreation elements, but this is also where I'll pause and say just because something might be common or typical doesn't mean it's right for your community. So I would remind you all again, this is very preliminary information. So when we look at the city of McHenry in green against SCORP in yellow, that would be the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. That is a report compiled on roughly a 5-year basis by the Illinois Department of Resource that looks statewide and provides recommendations. We also look at that once again against those 12 Midwest peer communities from Parkmetrics just to see how you stack up. And so looking across, you can see that the city provides significantly more shelters and playgrounds than some of your peer communities across these two benchmarks, but maybe has fewer things like some soccer fields or volleyball courts. And so once again, this is just a starting point for us to have a conversation now and say, this is what the numbers tell us. But as we move into the next section, how does this align from what we hear from your community and what we know people use in the community? Before we do move on fully, though, we do have, sorry, Susan, could you go to the next one? Because McHenry is a little bit unique, we have included some additional ones for more water-based activities as well, because you do have a unique opportunity with both the lake and the river to provide items like swimming beaches, boat launches, and fishing piers. So we use those same metrics as well, but since you have the opportunity to provide them, we do look at these also. And we do a very similar exercise for facilities. So just like we do parks, we look at the facilities themselves. We classify them roughly by primary use, if they're public-facing, providing recreation services and programming. If they're more support-based, like your bathhouse, like your restrooms throughout your parks, and if they're more maintenance-driven for operational sides of things. So we look at the square footage as well as the uses provided within. That said, you'll notice several items are in yellow. We have really just gone on some approximations for these square footages. So while we're confident they're close, we know that they may not be exactly, because some of these buildings are a bit older and may not have exact floor plans to reference. And just like we do with the parks as we move forward, sorry, a little out of order, apologies. The other item that we did dig deep on here is our architectural partners, FGM, has prepared a very detailed analysis of the rec center because we know that's your primary resource for programming and providing indoor needs. And so this report goes through several categories, ranks how the facility is performing, as well as breaks up the space within this specific building for more precise use analysis. Basically, the takeaways from this report is that the rec center is in very good condition and has been performing well, but it really is at capacity, we'll say. We understand that there's already been some storage converted to offices, and that the program and the rooms are pretty much filling up with what's being offered. And so when we take that staff information as well as the architect's professional opinion, we can then move that into a similar benchmarking exercise on our next page. So Park Metrics is much more focused on open space, but there is some data provided for facilities. That said, it's a little bit more limited. It's quite easy for us to understand what a playground is and what one playground means. However, it is a little bit more limited with how buildings are represented. Because Park Metrics is self-reporting, we are only able to look at these for specific square footage provided or if a specific type of use is provided. So specifically, we can see compared to similar agencies in the Midwest, it is the median number of buildings offered is 7 compared to McHenry's 16. So that's quite a big difference there. But what's very interesting as you look at the square footage of those operated buildings, the Park Metrics median is actually much higher than the city of McHenry. And so what that tells us is you have a lot of smaller buildings spread out across your community. And as we continue through as well, we can see how these buildings are being used. So how much of that facility space that you provide across all of these different locations is actually available for public use is actually only about just under 20% of your total square footage provided. So just something interesting to keep in mind as we start looking forward. I'm sorry, I misread that. That's 32. We'll continue forward. And please feel free if there's any questions. The final item that we're able to pull from Park Metrics are basically agency responsibilities. So this is a mix of who maintains park sites versus indoor facilities, and really that you can see compared to many of your peers, you're providing a lot of the same services that are maybe typical for agencies of our population size in this region, the only exceptions being an indoor swim facility and indoor performing arts. And so these are items that we'll take forward compared to our community results, or Connect results, and see if that truly is a need or just something to know and consider. That brings us to Connect phase, so we'll go right forward into the next slide. We'll talk about the online survey first. So this survey was released shortly before the holidays in December, closed at the end of February, with a total of 753 people participating, which was a phenomenal number. Thank you to Bill and his staff for promoting that and getting help from school districts, business bureaus for getting such wide reach. Of the participants, about 87% of respondents actually live in the city of McHenry, so it's nice to know that we're hearing from a lot of your citizens and taxpayers, but given what we know about community context, speaking from staff, and what some of the neighboring services are, it's also not surprising to know that people are traveling from outside and from other communities to also utilize some of your amenities. The highest groups of participants are probably who we expect your core users might be, your households with school-aged children, and your active adult and senior households. And if we think back to those demographic slides, that does seem to be pretty representative of who your community consists of. And so right before we get into some detail, just right off the back, I would like to congratulate you all on having a pretty wonderful park system where 62% of participants are satisfied and 31 neutral. That means less than 10% of people are dissatisfied with your system, which is a phenomenal approval rating. So well done, everybody. So getting into some specific questions. First off, we want to understand how these spaces are being used. So we break this into several pieces: parks, facilities, and programs. We'll start going through the parks questions, asking how often people are utilizing the parks. Most people are using the parks at least once a year, with only 8% of respondents never coming to any of the properties. As we move on to the next slide, we ask people who have attended any of the parks what they are satisfied with and not satisfied with. And so some of you may have noticed in your report there were several questions where a significant number of people have skipped. The reason being, for example, if you said you've never visited a park, we don't necessarily want to ask what you're satisfied or not satisfied with because that participant wouldn't have that knowledge. So those people were automatically skipped. That said, the most satisfied properties are the Riverwalk, Miller Riverfront Park, Miller Point Park, Veterans Memorial Park, and Fort McHenry, while the parks that people are the least satisfied with are East Beach Park, McKay Shores Beach, William H. Athoff Park, Knox Park, and Lakeland Park. So that starts to point us in a direction on where we might be focusing our attentions when we move into our planning. As we continue to our next slide, we also want to know, so people who say they don't visit the parks, we want to know why. The most common reason being people just aren't interested. The second being that the desired amenities aren't offered, and then it goes down from there. Some of these could be, might be able to be addressed if you so choose. Others, like maybe being too busy, I'm afraid we'll have a hard time clearing up those folks' schedules. I think we all wish we had more time. We also gave people an opportunity to provide their own comments in several of these questions, which are summarized in your packet. The most common reason people might have listed for others is they just didn't know what's available to them, either from just not being aware or either being new to the community specifically. And we ask, of outdoor amenities, what do people think should be the top priority? And I'm afraid that's a little small for me, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my cheat sheet here. I want to go off memory. I do believe that trails ranked quite highly.
The off-street, the multi-use trails is one.
Thank you, Bill.
And then pickleball, and then spray pads with water play is the green line, and then nature and interpretive trails.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And thank you for the Zoom as well. Very helpful. Yes, and so this question was provided as a multiple choice where people could select any and all that apply, but very similarly, people were given a open comment box as well to provide any additional input that they felt was important. If we continue on to the next portion, that brings us into the facilities, the indoor space. And so we asked many similar questions, wanting to understand how people are utilizing the facilities. So once again, starting with how often people visit the various facilities within the city. Quite a few people visiting very often. Making my job hard. A little bit higher group of people with 12% having never visited. When we ask people on the next slide why they don't visit, we once again see that desired programs or amenities not being offered is the number one reason why people may choose not to come to visit, with once again not interested or being too busy being also very high reasons. Very similarly with the parks, people who responded other largely said they just weren't aware of what's available within the community. And with the two main facilities provided that really are open to public recreation, being the rec center and the aquatic center, I suspect these results will not be surprising that about 63% of people are satisfied with the rec center compared to only about 20% with the aquatic center. As we continue through, we very similarly asked if what indoor amenities your public might be interested in as a top priority. And so right at the top, we do see indoor aquatics, followed by indoor walking running tracks, sauna steam rooms, senior center, and so on down the line. And I believe, yes, that brings us into our programs. So once again, we ask how often people are participating. These include both your daily, your weekly programs that are offered throughout the year, as well as special events. We see it's very common for people to show up just a few times a year, likely to those special events. However, this is an area where there is a little less participation, with 35% of people never participating within a year. And once again, asking why people may choose not to participate, we see those same responses rising to the top again, with just not having the desired options available, followed by a lack of interest or being too busy to participate. When we look at the other box for this category specifically, there were some people who were just saying that they weren't really familiar with the offerings. There were also several people who were able to speak more to some specific types of use and some specific programs they might be interested in. The other item we heard was just time of day. That can be a bit of a challenge when trying to match people's schedules. People who are unsatisfied with the programs, largely those who participate, 44% were satisfied. However, areas that could be opportunities for improvement include the actual programming spaces themselves, feeling that those are either inadequate or inappropriate for the desired use, or just needing some updates and some upgrades, either through the equipment itself or technology. And finally, this is a little bit of a revisit of some of our previous ones, but when we look holistically about both indoor and outdoor, as to what people are most interested in across both of those prior questions, we still see that trails and off-street walking and biking paths are rising to the top, followed by pickleball, but then we get indoor aquatics also coming to the top. So we get an interesting mix of both indoor and outdoor amenities from across those categories when we look at these results compared against both indoor and outdoor options. We also provided several objectives over the next couple years that people could rank in terms of what they think would be most beneficial to themselves and their household. The top priority that people identified was continuing to improve and upgrade the existing parks that already exist within the city. Actually following that is sustainable practices, so upgrading and improving in other ways with more of an environmental focus. And then acquiring and developing new indoor facility access spaces was a pretty close third, and we can see down the list some of how those other objectives stacked up. I will continue to go pretty quick, though, because I don't think we all want to be here too long. And when we look specifically at facility improvements, oh dear.
The indoor pool was number one, that first blue bar, and then indoor running and the walking track is number two. The outdoor pool and outdoor flag park expansion, that's the green line, that's third, and then the expanded fitness center, those are the top four in that category.
Thank you. All right. And that really is the very broad overview to the online survey. As mentioned, the full report is in the packet. Happy to dive deeper into anything if there are any questions. But in addition to the online survey, which is our best way to reach the most number of residents, we also provided an in-person community meeting, I believe back in February. This meeting was advertised pretty extensively, but we did end up with just 6 participants at that time. During that presentation, or during that community meeting, we went through a similar presentation to what we've shown you, a little bit more abbreviated, and then completed a workshop. And with those participants, we found the following rise to the top. We basically asked them to brainstorm ideas and then pick what they thought would be their top priorities. And those top priorities ended up being, I'm going to flip back.
Larger recreation center was number 2.
Thank you.
Build an outdoor pool was number 3. And the non-vehicular connectivity was number 4.
Yes.
What is that? The trails. The trails and the walking paths. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and we did a very similar exercise with Bill and his staff as well. 5 members of full-time staff, same presentation, same exercise, and this is starting to look a little familiar, isn't it, folks? Number 1 item that came up to the top was pool projects.
Number 1, and then the rec facility expansion was number 2. And a larger shelter at Knox Park was number 3. That was geared largely toward our summer day camp, which has just blown up in recent years, in the best of ways.
All right. And so the final piece of community engagement, we're very fortunate that the citywide plan has been happening at the same time and that we were able to review the results and look for areas where the city plan also identified some recreation elements. There were quite a few added, but once again, we're starting to see a lot of themes emerge, including the highest priority being for new sidewalks, bike lanes, and trails, with also some priority for natural areas and some all-weather recreation. We'll continue through these pretty briefly. In the next slide, there was some consensus that there is some new development needs for open space, that some year-round programming is also needed, presumably for those winter months. As always, we find that the kids and teenagers, especially those older kids, those tweens, tend to be a little bit harder to reach and engage. And we see that indoor recreation facility coming towards the top of the pile once again. as we continue forward. We're also seeing a general consensus that natural landscapes and rural feel are important to the community and that bike and sidewalk networks are needed. So once again, looking at that non-vehicular aspect. And that really brings us to our next step. So to touch very briefly on our schedule, really tonight wraps up the end of our needs assessment. So the workshop we're about to do with you tonight will mark the end of this phase. And from here, we can take all of this data and start actually forming those conclusions. As previously mentioned, the prioritized phase will focus on assessing all of this information to determine what's truly a need versus what's just a data point, and really looking for those points of commonality between all of our different resources to determine what might be a goal and then what strategies might be available to achieve that goal. The implement portion will be taking those items and putting them on an actual calendar for the next 5 to 10 years that then help you chart your future, understanding what steps must be taken if you want to accomplish those goals. And then, of course, that final implementation plan will be your final booklet. All goes well, we plan to be wrapping up this process and getting you your final report in hand and to the public somewhere in the October to November range, with one more appearance before the council, just within that prioritize and implement phase to make sure that we're still on track. And so with that, if there aren't any, are there any questions about the information we provided?
Alderman Glenn?
Yeah, we'll start out with, when did we rename the park as far as Fort McHenry Park? Where did that come from?
We just made that with it.
We don't have a park, Fort McHenry Park. It's part of Whispering Oaks Park.
That's correct.
So let's make sure that that's deemed that way, because I was there when we started building Fort McHenry Park, or Fort McHenry in Whispering Oaks Park, and that's the way it should always be determined. It shouldn't be split up. So I just wanted to bring that up. But and that's a small mute point, but it's a very touchy situation over there in Whispering Oaks over the years, so wanted to be sure that was discussed. I see where this is all going. However, the one thing that wasn't brought up in this is everybody wants this, everybody wants this. Who wants to pay for it?
Yes, and
it'll go to the beginning of the rec center, because before we started the rec center, we did a referendum, which was shot down. People did not want to pay for a rec center, and that's when we came up with the whole idea of the bonding and of the money and using the developer donation funds and paying the bonds off with the use of the people that use the center. And I think that's something huge, that if we're going to go into anything big like an indoor pool, that's something we have to go out to referendum on. See if the community's willing to pay for it. Yeah, we all like this and we'd all like that. I'd love to go to all my constituents and say, look at what the city of McHenry is going to do in the next 10 years. But I don't want to say, look at the other side and look what it's going to cost us. You know, this is a decision that the community needs to make as far as whether they're willing to pay for certain things. And I'm not saying every little thing, but as far as something big like an indoor pool or expanding the rec center, that is definitely something that should be going out to the constituents to vote on. And I, not to say an advisory, I think it needs to be a commitment by the community that they're willing to pay for whatever. I mean, you're looking at a lot of these amenities that people want. You know, you talk about pickleball, and I know Alderwoman Miller is big on pickleball, and the community is big on pickleball. But 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the community was huge on disc golf, and percentage-wise, it's way down there in popularity now, isn't it? And 8, 10 years from now, pickleball may be down too. And again, this whole thing is to build for the future. So we got to be very careful of what we are expanding and you know, the reasoning behind it, because we don't want to create all these pickleball courts and then all of a sudden they're not being used. Yeah. Walk paths, well, Whispering Oaks has had walk paths since the year that they built Whispering Oaks, started building it. And the use of them, very, very few. People walk the sidewalks. They like that openness. They don't like walking into, how would you say, secluded areas, I guess, because you don't see very many people using those walk paths. nobody wants to get rid of them, but nobody hardly uses them either. So, I think we have to be, creative of, as far as where we would be putting walk paths in, where we would be putting in bike paths. I don't think everybody wants to see a bike path, through their neighborhood, through, in the neighborhoods themselves, maybe in the main roads, but I don't know about through different type of areas. You've got, as far as future planning along Boone Creek, and that won't be in my lifetime, I can tell you that right now because of the cost. But that's a perfect spot, whether it be walk paths or even a bike trail. Again, bicycling, I've seen over the last 30, 40 years, it just kept increasing. So there's, my feeling is I don't see it ever just dropping off. So that's something that we do need to take and bite the bullet and find some good alternatives for biking. But again, if we're going to build bike trails, we got to be careful where we're building them. I still remember when we first got the trail paths in, and all the bikers that would go through there, and people going into the park for Fiesta Days, and some of them would get almost run over by these bicyclists because they felt it was their path, and they were just going and ramming through. So unfortunately, that's the way of the world nowadays. But let's try to build it so that it's accessible to them and it's courteous to the rest of the people, with that. So with that, I'd leave it to the council for some more discussion.
Thank you. Alderman Miller? Sorry, she's been waiting for 5 minutes.
So when you completed the report, thank you for identifying that we had 700-plus respondents. That was awesome, and they did work hard to get that for you. Any surprises on the responses based on other reports that you've done?
Nothing too surprising. Every community will have some unique aspects. Specific for McHenry, the water access was very top of mind for many participants, which I don't think was a surprise, but is something unique and special to this community. Otherwise, some of the top trending items, such as the pickleball, the trails, and the splash pads, that is pretty consistent with what we've been seeing in many other communities, as well as in state and national reporting on recreation, which we follow very closely each year. We know that all of those, to your point, Alderman, are trends. That isn't to say that they will always be trends, but we can certainly track their popularity over time and understand what that means, not just for your community, but for other communities as well. And the other item that I think was maybe a bit unique would be just the focus on indoor spaces. I wouldn't say that's unique to your community. I would say it was unique to any community where you might have an aging facility, such as your current aquatic building, or a single facility that is more of an all-purpose that many, many people are familiar with and utilizing. Does that answer your question, or is there more I can answer for you?
I have a follow-up question, again, relying on your experience. Are we typical for our population size where we have, how many parks do we have, Bill? 42?
42, yes.
40 parks that are some minis, some neighborhoods, some communities. Is that the trend, or is there a trend going towards consolidation and offering just bigger, less mini parks? What's the trend, and how do we compare?
You're very typical for the greater Chicago region. I would point out that Chicago is more of a unique, and the state of Illinois is more unique compared to some other Midwest communities in terms of quantity provided, largely due to the state's history of grant funding for acquisition and developments of parks. But compared to other communities in the suburbs, we typically do see a much greater quantity of parks than that median average.
Thank you.
Alderman Bessie.
I just wanted to comment about the bike trails and the walking paths. As someone who does both every single day, we like to be safe.
Of course.
So I really am a huge advocate of bike trails. and walking trails, but I would like to see them maintained. You were talking about the one in Whispering Oaks. The reason we don't go there, and I used to go on there all the time, you're like going through bush just to get through the path. So that needs to be trimmed quite a bit so that it is safer to use and more accessible. So having said that, we do want to be safe, so I do like the idea of trails a lot. But I do have another question. Bill, can we all get the raw data? I would really love to see the itemized list of all what the others were, because they could actually type in what they wanted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So
Yeah, the bulk of that raw data is included. If there's from those other comments, the specific comments, we'll track those down and get those in your hands. But that's why we tried to include all the aspects that made up this.
right, and
But we'll
I
track the other-
understand you're
yeah.
summarizing it, and I appreciate that. But if I could also see the raw data, I would appreciate that. So, thank you. That's all.
Thank you for your comments.
Any other questions? Alderman Davis?
Just one comment. I think kind of what we've seen over the years is with the bike pass, and it may not necessarily be that we necessarily need more bike pass or multi-use pass, blah, blah, but I think the connectivity of those paths, right?
Absolutely.
Is really probably what's top of mind for most people, so that they can get to one area or do stuff like that. So, just kind of a different perspective on that point.
Can I just make a comment on the
Sure,
biking
go
too?
ahead.
It is also very nice if you want to ride your bike to, say, the Jewel. It's nice to know that there's a safe path to get there. You put your little basket on your bike and you can go. So it would be nice because then also you're reducing car traffic, emissions, et cetera. And it's also good for your pocketbook so you don't have to pay for gas.
Alderman Miller?
I just wanted to comment on the bike path thing as well. As I travel many of the communities during my work, I do notice that other communities have better identified safe bike paths, not necessarily a dedicated lane, but, some more signage and more on-street identification of there will be bikes next to you, don't ride the curb kind of moment. Monty's laughing at me. So I would love to see us make an effort of creating safe zones. If we're not creating an extra 4-foot bike path, at least creating some safe zones for bicycle riders. That's paint, right, Steve?
Yes, we did, Green Street actually already has it.
Yeah, so I just noticed it in other communities. I don't see it here, between signage and paint on the pavements. I think that would be nice for the bike riders.
When doing these reports, I have a question. Are you comparing to municipalities that have parks departments versus park districts? Is there, because obviously we're a parks department versus a parks district, so or does that not matter?
We do
compare. Obviously they have more funding than we would.
Yes, we do compare against both. So the challenge we have when finding peers to compare against is finding enough to have a sample that we consider representative. So we typically try to get at least double digits, preferably 12, 13, somewhere in the teens of communities of a similar population size. So in this case, we did include park districts as well to try to get enough samples. That said, we have access to the data. So if there were a deeper study or a different way to look at things, that always remains an option we can explore with Bill and his staff if you'd like to look at a different perspective.
I really can't answer that now. I was just curious if it was, because a lot of municipalities with 30,000 people, many of them, I'm guessing, has park districts.
Park districts in Illinois are much more common than parks departments.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And that's in Illinois. However, as we look at other Midwest states, the districts are quite rare, and so those are more likely to be a department for comparison.
Right. Got it. Thank you. Alderman Davis?
No, I just wanted to kind of build off yours. That's a great point, because I don't think a lot of people really know the difference between that, and one's revenue generating and the other is not, right? So I think that's a very distinct point that I'd like to see kind of that data on.
Sure. Yeah, and looking at the list of 12, it looks like roughly half are departments, half are districts.
Hold on, Miller.
I think our community probably understands the difference between a department and a district very well, since we have school districts and a library district versus a City of McHenry library and City of McHenry schools. So I think our communities, because they are served, they elect the boards.
You would think.
And they have a tax.
You would think.
And
But-
they have a tax line supporting them. I think.
If they read the tax bill.
I think we probably, or I would hope that our constituents understand the difference. But
Right.
again, I'm making an assumption, and I'll be surprised. Thank you.
Any other, Alderman Gleb?
Yeah, you know, I'm glad somebody brought up the difference between the park districts and park departments. And again, I saw this even before I was on the council, and it's the fact that I think a good example, and this is what we have to be careful of, are we developing our parks for our residents, or are we doing them for the entire area? You know, granted, it doesn't mean they're not welcome in our parks, but are we developing it for what our residents need and not what the entire area is? And where we got into a lot of problems with years and years ago was soccer fields. The Soccer Federation back in the early 90s was growing and growing and growing, and every time twice, 3 times a year, I think, they were knocking on the door for the City of McHenry to build more ball fields. And then you took a look at where all the kids were coming from. You know, there were 700 and some odd kids in the Federation at the time, and some of the communities, there was one community that had maybe 8 or 10% of the kids, and all that community or that town was giving was one little lot behind a church or something that was full of rocks and everything else, from what I was told. And yet the City of McHenry was supplying a ton of different, I mean, Althoff Park was built, you know, constantly. It was more and more, and they kept coming back to the City of McHenry, you know, and the City of McHenry was generous enough to build them. But finally, I don't know, second or third year in there, I started bringing up the fact that we needed to slow down on you know, providing it for everybody else. We needed to look at what was providing for our residents and not the entire area. You know, not saying that they can't come in and use it, but we need to look at what's good for our community. Now, you looked at the percentages. Everybody's talking about biking. Everybody's talking about pickleball. How many residents that you know of that are my age or older, that are seniors, that are still active enough to do that stuff? I mean, yeah, I know. I do too, but all I'm getting at is you look at the percentages go... Excuse me? I'm sorry?
Pickleball.
But what I'm saying is the age demographics is going up, and yet that's all we're talking about is for the youths. And I think to some extent, the indoor facilities don't always have to be just indoor swimming pools. What are we doing for our seniors as far as crafts, you know, that type of stuff that our seniors would do? Granted, the township does do things for them, but there's nothing here locally within the city that we really offer that much of. And I think maybe that's one of the things we need to look into.
I'd like to point out the soccer fields real quick. So we are in need of soccer fields. Actually, my kids, we have to go to Richmond every weekend with our kids, and we end up spending money in Richmond. Actually, there's probably 250 kids from this area that goes to Richmond and has tournaments there every weekend. So, you know, I'm just saying, like, soccer fields is something that we need. Althoff Park is so wet that it's difficult to possibly, I'm just thinking.
It's actually in better shape now. After we let it rest for a while, the McHenry Junior Warriors football program uses that pretty extensively now. So that's been a nice use out there for them. And but where that park literally sat there for 10 years, Althoff Park probably sat there because it was built on a bog, and it was wet, and the grass didn't hold. And so now it is in better shape. I'm not sure if it would sustain year-round use, but it's worked really well for the spring and for the fall for the Junior Warriors football program. I believe the Soccer Federation did explore using that at one point, and weren't ready to make that change. They did reorganize, and so they've become, they've actually spread themselves out, and we haven't seen as many requests for soccer fields specifically from them, because they're utilizing other communities exactly to your point. So there's a plus and minus that some of those people are leaving our community, and that's where those dollars are going. But on the other side, there's not those requests for soccer fields, to your point, that we're not catering to, that our residents are the primary focus. The other thing I did want to add is the nice thing about the respondents from our public survey was the seniors were pretty significantly represented, which they were the number 2 represented group, which was great to get that participation from that senior group. So, and I will say the pickleball, go down to those courts anytime, and you'll see the demographics that's using them. And be careful if you challenge them, because they will run you off the court pretty quickly.
They take it seriously.
Yes, they do.
Alderman Bassi.
As I'm looking at this again, I don't see any outside activities, specifically in the winter. There are certain communities that have designated areas for cross-country skiing. And I've had this conversation with Bill in the past. As soon as there's a good snow and you think you can cross-country ski, the snowmobilers are out and you cannot cross-country ski. We have some really great areas where you can ice skate. Unfortunately, hockey players take it over immediately. So I would like to see a little bit more outdoor winter activities available for all people, not just senior citizens. Thank you.
Okay.
I've got another question for Bill. Peterson Park, or, the ball fields that are out there, are they still utilized by the high school?
The one field is utilized. Field 2, the freshmen and sophomores, the underclassmen utilize that field. The varsity and the junior varsity have moved to the field behind West Campus.
So is it because of the amount of teams they have out there, or leagues, or is it just preference that they've moved it to behind West?
Well, they built a beautiful field behind West with the field.
I understand that, and I understand it's an expansion of a conditional use that was considered, I guess, by staff that they didn't need to come to the city council to show us what they were doing, but that's another whole story. My question, more so than anything else, is again, what are we building them for, and down in the future, and again, maybe we need to discuss this more with the grammar schools and the high schools as far as what are their plans for things like this, so we're not overlapping, let's put it that way, and let's work together as a community so that whatever we are building, again, it's not duplicated, and our residents do get the best bang for their buck.
Yeah, actually, that addition of the high school field has been very nice because of the use that happens on Field 2. It actually has provided more community access now moving that varsity field. We only had one 90-foot baseball field in all, and we were the only one. We were the only 90-foot baseball field in all of the city of McHenry. So for them to add that at their own dime, to add that to the inventory was great. But then it also freed up for community use to be able to have some time to access that. So that's an example, I guess, to your point of cooperating with the school districts and make sure we're not duplicating services. But when we look at our entire inventory, which we did capture in our analysis phase, is try to look at what else is being presented, like the VFW fields. Those aren't ours, but obviously they're used by our community, and so that does play a role in, do we need more baseball fields? Not necessarily, because others are providing it.
Well, West does have an indoor pool.
Right, but our community doesn't have access to it. That's the hard part. They allow us to use it for our swim team, but beyond that, to my knowledge, I don't believe there's community access to that any longer. When I was a kid, on Sundays, which was forever and ever ago, there was a small portion of time on the weekends that you could access that and have some community pool time, but that's not available anymore to my knowledge.
Again, it's part of the community, it's part of what the taxpayers pay for. They should be able to use it.
At the District 156 meeting.
Alderman Cook?
Is there a way that we could utilize McCollum Lake for ice skating? I mean, like set it up for a hockey field or, ice hockey, put the boards up like you do over there off of Dartmoor there?
We have in the past. Obviously, weather's been the big thing.
Well, I
That's been
understand
the biggest
that, but
thing,
I
where
meant-
we would drill a hole and we'd take a pump out there, we'd, snow blow it off, we'd flood a portion of, right off of East Beach Park. We'd flood that and make a nice, clear ice. It just becomes time and manpower and where we're putting our resources to be able to create those facilities. We used to flood, Friend Field, those basketball courts over there. I put a liner down. That one worked really well because there was pavement below it and it was fenced off. So you could put the liner down, flood it, and then fence it off and nobody could get on it. The downside of Fox Ridge, where you have to wait for the heat to get out of the ground because there's no asphalt below, that could be a good opportunity to put in an inline hockey rink that's during the year, and then the pavement's down to be able to flood it. I don't know how much it helps us for keeping hockey players off of it, but being able to isolate these facilities that they don't, as the ice is freezing, people are staying off of it. We've seen that happen as well. So the addition of the refrigerated rink last year was just a huge benefit for us. I know it's not a super huge one, but it was really well utilized and a great amenity that we can utilize for basically from December 1st all the way to the end of February, basically, is how long we had that. So, but we have had that in the past. It becomes weather dependent, and that's the hard thing. And it's also manpower heavy to be able to create those facilities.
I just never seen it before, and, I thought, okay, throw it out there.
Sorry, we went a little off there, so
Hey,
go ahead, the floor is yours.
It says discussion and workshop, so
Yeah,
we've done the
you should've
discussion.
took discussion off for a little bit, but,
No,
go
this
ahead.
is actually a great segue, because what we're going to ask you all to do next is our workshop, and many of you have already started to come up with ideas for not only what you'd like to see in the community, but maybe some opportunities to provide them. So Max is actually going to hand out some supplies, and we're going to put a question up on the screen, which is, what would you like to see the City of McHenry Parks and Recreation focus on for the next 5 to 10 years? So I will remind the group, this is still a visioning session. We certainly need to answer all of those really pertinent questions that were raised about feasibility, about finance, about usage, but we do also want to think about what the priorities might be, both based on what you hear tonight, based on what you hear from your constituents, and what you yourselves and your family might experience as people who use recreation services and live in the community. And so we're going to hand out some note cards. We'll ask that each of the directors and the council people participate in some brainstorming exercises, and then we'll move into prioritization. If any members of the public would also like to participate, we are welcome
Come
them
on.
to fill out comment cards as well. Wow, I cleared that room right out. Yeah, so I know many of you already had some fantastic ideas, so feel free to start writing as you get your cards.
Do you want a couple ideas on the card, just to clarify? Do you want
Yes,
just one
as
idea?
many as you can think
As
of.
many as you can think of.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Bullet points.
Is there a time on?
There is. So,
We hope to get through this whole exercise
Holy
in
cow.
about half an hour, right?
Yes, that's right. So I'm going to stand here and give you some prompts to help you brainstorm. Feel free to respond to as many or as few of them as you see fit. I'm just going to stand here, talk you through, try to keep the ideas going. And we just ask that you write down everything because we will be collecting the cards at the end. So this is just the first chance to start generating ideas. As I said, it can be what you want to see. It can also be some of the things you've brought up with us tonight during discussion about how you might like to see some of these things get done. And then after we have a good set of ideas, we're going to start asking you to narrow them down and prioritize them. We'll put them on the wall, and eventually we'll ask you all to vote on them as well. So that way we start to get a broad list of ideas that we can still look at and review, and then some priorities that rise to the top of those needs as we consider them as a group. So with that said, I'm going to start talking at you. As I said, feel free to write and listen as much as you need, but starting out with the parks and open spaces, thinking about what you would like to see in the community. Are there any amenities that do not currently exist that you think would be beneficial to the community? These could be trends that we've talked about today. These could be things that you've heard the community request. These could be things that you're aware of happening throughout the nation, that you've heard about at things like conferences, through literature. Oh, our first big sigh.
Is that Vic?
And this doesn't just have to be something new. This doesn't have to be something new either. These could be things that you already offer, that you know are popular and you need more of. Or these could be things that you offer but could be a little bit better. It could be maintained, or it could be expanded or added to, or just adjusted a little bit and to better serve your community. We can think very big picture. We can also think small to specific sites. I'll continue to pause and keep talking again.
This is the fun part. This is the wish list.
Exactly, the wish
what would you like
list.
to see?
I'm afraid our pragmatists...
Regardless of how we pay for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think our pragmatists think this is the fun bit, Bill. I think they're seeing dollar signs. So we think about our outdoor spaces. A lot of times we think about our physical things, our playgrounds, our basketball courts, tennis courts, pickleball, all the things that we build and then have to maintain and upkeep. But we also have our open spaces, our natural areas, our ecological resources, and especially our water in the community. So as we think about open spaces, outdoors, parks, and recreation, we want to expand as well and think not just about the built areas, but also the land that's available. This could be park use itself. This could be locations in your community. Yeah, if you need another card, raise your hand. We've got plenty. We'll keep them coming. You might have set a speed record for us. That's amazing.
Jeez.
Just give her the stack, yeah. And so we started by thinking about parks and open spaces, but let's expand that now. Let's think about our facilities. We talked a lot about the facilities that exist, how they're performing for you, what might be performing well versus what might be a little bit outdated or need to be expanded to better meet those needs. This could be changes to your existing locations. This could be looking at all of those other properties that serve more of a support or maintenance need and how you might be able to utilize or benefit from those amenities and those facilities that you already have, or it could be something brand new. I know we want to talk about dollars and cents, so that's all right. If you have an idea for how something might be achieved, feel free to provide that as well. And this doesn't just have to be public-facing either. We know that a lot of public recreation is based on your community's input, but we have a lot of directors here who know what they need to do their jobs, what their staff needs, what the maintenance needs are, what kind of equipment and resources and trainings they need to keep the city running well for the community, because that benefits your residents too, having the resources and the personnel you need to get your job done and keep things running. As many as you can come up with. Does everyone have at least 3 on their card?
Yeah.
Yeah? We're doing great then.
Come on, Vic.
And so we've talked about your parks, we've talked about your facilities, but we can think about the spaces between them as well. We talked a lot about who else is providing services in your community, be it an indoor pool through the school district, other providers of fields, and so how might you communicate or work with those community members to discuss what their future plans are, or to see if there's a way to collaborate with them in the future. I believe you already have had a history of some intergovernmental agreements with some of your community partners, and what about those has worked well for you? Are there some of those that you might like to continue? Because that's a valid strategy as well. If things are working well, let's not lose track of what's succeeding. Let's make sure that we're continuing to support things that function well and that have good response. And look for those opportunities where you might be able to make improvements or establish something new. And so these outside forces, outside of your parks, outside of your facilities, could be those other potential partners. It could be your potential sponsors. It could be local. It could be national, could be at the state level. As we look at things like who might provide some additional grant funding to help ease some of that burden, or where might you be able to find a partnership that could help provide some special use and have that relationship where you're meeting a need without having to be the sole provider of something. And this can be those connected spaces as well. We talked a little bit earlier about those trails, not just the trails themselves, but how they're being used. We already heard that safety is absolutely a concern. We want to feel safe in our community. So how can we not only provide those connective points for our pedestrians, for our cyclists, even for our people accessing our locations through automobiles? What can we do to improve their safety and security? Not just how they get to the parks and the facilities themselves, once they're within them. And when people do arrive at your locations, what's their experience as they walk into your parks or your facilities? Are they comfortable? Do they feel safe? Do they know where to go? We heard from some of your community that they might not be aware of what's available to them, and so is that something that might like to be addressed? Is there a way you would like to reach out to your community or help make things clear or help identify where things are, how to get to places? Anyone else need more cards? Still doing all right?
No, I'm good.
If anyone does, just please raise your hand and we'll keep those coming. And let's talk a little bit about weather as well. We heard a little bit already about four-season use. We know that it's very common to think about parks in summer and spring and fall, but what do we do in the winter? Are there amenities, programs, spaces that could be provide some special or some unique or desired seasonal uses as well, to not just take advantage of your properties during the beautiful weather, but also when we have the cold weather, when we have the rain? Oh, thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, I better keep talking. What time? Let's think a little bit more about not just your physical locations, but the activities that go on. There's events, there's programs. This is a great opportunity to think about our user groups. We talked a little bit about age. What do you have for your youngest children in the city, those who aren't starting school yet, who maybe don't have those educational resources? And what do the school-aged children do? Many of them are probably participating in options to their school, but what do they do in the summer or after school ends? And as those kids get older and older, what are the teens and the preteens in your community getting up to or perhaps into?
Wants to be included. Yeah. I said it, if anyone wants to.
As we continue to talk about different age groups, and we have the community moving into more adults, we have some younger adults moving back into your community, either come back to visit their families or in between college or moving to the community as young adults. Oh, question? More cards?
Yeah, no, I'm filled, but I'm good.
You can keep going.
I have a question. I think it's probably both of you, because we talked about this years ago. With our natural areas, our nature areas, if we can place walking paths within those areas, I know we can't blacktop or we can't concrete. It's got to be like cinder or something like that, isn't it? Or is that just for wetlands?
It depends on which ones we're talking about. Certain ones there's
Great
restriction.
example is right across the street.
Example would be the Fen, like Wheeler Fen. There's being in a Fen, we have to stay in certain areas. If we're going to put a paved path, it has to be in the top. But we do have a grass trail that we can mow and maintain. It becomes like Glacier Park. Obviously, they have grass trails throughout the whole park. But there's certain spots where we're either using limestone. Sometimes you can't bring fill in. Sometimes you can't bring asphalt. And that's where the grass trail comes in nice, and utilizing different types of trails in different parks. Cold Springs Park is another one. We have to be careful where we go with what type of park. Or Miller Riverfront Park that connects Country Club Drive to the park itself. It's just a mulch path right now, so we would just need to make sure that as it traverses through a wetland, what type of materials can we use? Can we bring in, is limestone considered fill? And we're allowed to use that. That'd be a question that we'd have for Army Corps, which is why it's just a natural wood chip path at this point.
So we'd have to go to the Army Corps to just think that one example, to get approval to fill it.
Correct. We don't want to get our hands slapped for bringing fill into a wetland.
Yeah, and have you seen, or, in other, other areas, other municipalities where they've taken areas like this and at least been able to, it's a nice looking area, but you can't walk through it.
Yeah.
Have you seen other municipalities do something with those areas?
Absolutely. It's very dependent on the site and how it's classified and which regulatory agencies it falls under. But some are less critical, will even allow paved paths, and those are not considered fill because of the access they provide in the public education, whereas others might be more restrictive to either still allow a path as long as the ground level is not raised, or even an opportunity for something like a boardwalk, or to identify high points on the site where you provide access very selectively while protecting the most critical parts of the path. So I would say that yes, what you've described is very feasible. It's just a case-by-case basis that would need some study.
Thank you. And the one option that you mentioned, the boardwalk, would be that's a definite cost, because now you're driving piers in and and maintenance.
Yeah, and you've actually seen, like Moraine State Park, they've taken their boardwalks out. So they've changed their paths around and taken boardwalks out, just because of the maintenance nightmare on a lot of those. So my recommendation would be how we can avoid some of those would be great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the same way. Thank you.
Yeah, so wrap up our visioning now. If anyone wants to continue, as I said, you cannot give us much information, so don't feel shy if you filled your card to ask for another. But we were talking about age groups and youth. I would just like to briefly come back, think not just about the children who we sometimes think about most, but think about the adults as well. Younger adults, people just starting out, to the parents of the children, and what are they doing while their children are enjoying the city recreation services, all the way up to people as they continue to age and enjoy the community, what is available to seniors, be it physical amenities or programs. And as we talk about what's available, we can think too about some of those programs specifically. Are there areas of interest? Are there certain cultural elements that are unique to the community that might become an opportunity to share some history or share some experience, and reach out to different community members and make a more welcoming experience for everyone in McHenry? So we're going to start wrapping up in just a moment now. We're going to ask you to go back through your list and start to pick out the top 2 things that you think are most important. So Max is going to hand out some sticky notes and some big pens, and I'm going to move over there and start yelling at you.
Right on, just so.
Okay.
Hey Doug, you wanna turn yours on just so they can, there you go. We don't want anyone else to do it.
All right, so as the last few cards get collected, if you're still working on yours, that's fine, just go ahead and leave those up. But we're gonna start going through some of the different items that we've got coming up. So as we go through, I'm gonna be looking around, feel free to speak up, nod or shake your head, let me know if we've got this right. But I think we have a few things that I feel pretty confident about here in the middle. And that's, 2 here that say indoor pool, 2 here that say outdoor pool and outdoor aquatic center. And then right here in the middle, we have a few that seem to be a little bit of both. Indoor-outdoor water park, new indoor-outdoor pool, new indoor-outdoor pool, and this one just says water park. So we'll go ahead and keep that in the middle for now. So as we look at these different categories, it does seem like we maybe have a few start to go to the top. Now my question for everyone here is, are indoor and outdoor pools or the combination the same thing? Are they all aquatics, or do we want to make a distinction between the indoor and the outdoor elements? Do we think it's important to keep these separate, or do these all belong together under a larger category? Go ahead.
I personally think that it should be both, right? It's gonna, you have one facility that accommodates both.
All right.
Especially
Any
knowing
other-
that the outdoor right now is on its last leg or two.
We made it through the summer.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone knock on wood real fast. I think there was another comment.
So mine says water park, you can put that in the indoor/outdoor water park.
Oh.
Just aquatic facility in general.
So we've heard 2 people who seem to think that the indoor-outdoor pool are pretty related, that we can't necessarily separate them. If I could, is that sound like the right direction? Any objections? So if we're going to keep these together in one big category, what are we calling this? Is this pool? Is it aquatic center? Do we want to keep it vague? Do we want to be a little more specific? Do we want to call the category and specify the whole thing as indoor/outdoor? Is this more just a vague need for aquatic use?
Sounds like it's more semantic.
It is a little bit. We start with the easy one. So if there's no strong preferences, maybe we just call it aquatic.
I would agree with that.
All right, fantastic. There you go. Yeah, it's also a spelling bee for poor Max. I send him running around the room and then I ask him to spell. So if you guys want to make a challenge, let's get some categories with some big words. All right, right next to that we have another group that seem to have something in common. We have safe bike paths, trails, paths, connections, prairie path-I-20 underpass. I think that just means bike paths. I believe the 2 was the just the idea order. We have connection of bike paths, and we have bike and pedestrian paths. Do we think we probably have these in about the right spot? Does everything seem like it has something in common here? All right. And now we just need to find a name for this one. Connectivity.
Connect.
No, I got it.
Probably one they hear a lot. Everyone's liking connectivity? Fantastic. All right. Let's move over to something that might be a little bit more vague. We have bike park, we have disc golf, we have pavilions. So these might be outdoor amenities, these might be maybe some new activities, or do any of these relate to something we already talked about with the bike park and the trails? Is that different? And do these 3 belong together? I guess that'll be where we start. Do these 3 all belong together, or are these 3 different ideas?
I think those are 3 different ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I did that.
All right.
You're right, I'm not.
So bike park, this is on its own?
Unless you did something like an outdoor recreation park, right?
So that was mine. So I was thinking like something like a dirt bike park
So different from trails?
Yes.
So definitely something unique.
Yep.
But if you had a recreation center, it may have a disc golf area, it could have a play.
Yep.
Okay.
The disc golf's mine too.
You know, I mean, so skateboarding is
Out there.
on your own.
Putting that out there.
All right. So it sounds like then, even though these are different activities that might be in some sort of rec complex, we still want to look at them separately for now then.
That's fine.
No problem. We can always come back to them later. All right. So we're just going to put those right at top because they're kind of their own thing. All right, we've got a couple here that have to do with indoor items, I think. We have indoor sports facilities, expand rec center, with an indoor pool, activities, and trends. We have multi-sport facility / recplex. I'm assuming that's indoor. We have more indoor rec areas, such as gyms and walking tracks. We also have one to the side that says upgrade the barn and convert to an indoor income-generating business. So as we go down the list, we have several that have to do here with more public-facing indoor recreation activities, and one that has maybe more of a revenue stream. So, go ahead.
So, I had both things separate because to me they're two different, although they could be incorporated. So, an indoor sports facility would be something like a Camlin where they support multi-sports. So it could be basketball, volleyball, soccer, lacrosse, whatever it is. But it also is income generating because other clubs pay to use those clubs today, or that facility for indoor, as well as outdoor if they have that type of stuff. So it could be both, whereas an indoor rec center would be more your traditional, it has an open basketball courts and stuff like that. So, but that could be the same facility and still generate income because there's basketball clubs, there's all these other things, baseball, softball, that would utilize those indoors. So, to me, it could be the same thing. It depends on how you want to utilize it, but if it's there, why not generate income with it?
Sure. So maybe what we do for now is we take our revenue generation and we leave that to the side for now. We can come back to that later. And we can just look down these, and do we agree that the rest of these remain together? We'll come back to this one later.
Sure.
Okay. And so what are we thinking this is? We do have expand the rec center. We also have some new ideas. So is this facilities? Is it new facilities? Is it facility renovations, improvements? Do we want to keep it a little more broad, or are we talking about working with what we've got, or are we talking about brand new, or is that maybe not a distinction we can make for the various items?
Well, I think it would be new. It could be new or an expansion of the current rec center.
I think there's a comment at the end.
I would say like expansion / new, and I was one of the folks that I brought up the idea of, I really think that's something that could be done and used for numerous different activities, and would be able to be at least rented from time to time with special clubs, your volleyball night, your basketball night, and using that facility extensively through the winter months.
All right, I think we have then a category here that starts with new / expanded facility, and we're going to come back to this item in just a moment. All right. So I've got a couple over here. I have one that I think says picnic areas PA.
What does that say?
I think picnic areas PA. Public areas? Public areas, that might make sense too.
Who wrote it? It wasn't. Come on, fess up.
We've got the messy handwriting. All right, there's another one to circle back on. Maybe we'll jog our memory as we rule out some of the other options.
I wrote his down.
He laughed. All right, that might be the person who left the room, okay. We have one here that says figure skating area, not hockey. So we talked about Are we talking about indoor or outdoor here? Outdoor. And so we already separated several of the other outdoor items, so is this also just on its own? All right.
Sorry, what does that one say?
This one says figure skating area, not hockey.
Figure skating. Oh my gosh,
Uh-oh.
I'd break a leg.
You don't break a leg.
Oh, I would. I would.
All right, well, we can come back to this. Let's keep moving. We can always revisit this before we get to voting. We have one here that says more things for kids, dog park. Did someone cheat and give me 2 ideas, or do we have a dog park only for kids and puppies?
I admit. I cheated.
So is this about, is this 2 things perhaps?
It is. I mean, both are just important. Go with the more things for kids.
All right. All right, we're gonna let him get away with it. Can you write dog park on there for me? All right, so we have something that's more about your user groups. I don't think we've covered that in any other categories. We're gonna go ahead and leave this here for now as well. And I think that leaves us with a few things over here. We've got take care of what we've got, exclamation point. That seems to be something that we haven't looked at yet, so we're gonna leave that on its own, I think. And we also have something that says, I believe, double staff offer 24/7, 365 activities. So my question, is this about programs, or is this about your recreation staff and your employees?
That would be me, and that's in response to our survey, where we had a large percentage of people that have never visited the rec center, never visited a park, never used our services. So we're clearly not offering the time or the thing that they want. But when we drive by the 24/7 other athletic facilities, there are people in there all night long. So the only way we can do that is if we double our staff and have all of our facilities open 24/7, which will make Mr. Hobson nuts. But it's our wish.
Just put a bed in there, that's fine.
It's our wish list, so, I would love to have all of our offerings 24/7.
Sue, do you have an idea or example of one of those? I know there's gyms that are 24 and stuff like that, but
Yeah,
what
so
other
they
ones would do 24?
do like classes at night, so people can go after dinner and do classes, and, you know, if you work till 11 o'clock at night, you can go to your chair yoga class at 2 in the morning. Oh, yoga's a good one. So maybe
Would it be
if we're
more of
looking
an
at our-
expansion of programs?
Yeah, but in order to expand our programs, because there is no way to expand programs with the limited hours that we have at the rec center, we need a bigger rec center and more staff.
And more money.
Yeah, and, well, of course, more money, but nobody said the money was not just here. We have all the money we could spend. And if you focus on our age group and our aging demographic, those are people who may not want to be in the height of busyness. They may want to have a more private opportunity, and we don't provide that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
So as we look at that discussion of reaching more people, does that have something in common with the more things for kids? Or do you think these may go together as a way to provide more services or to reach more residents? Or do we want to keep them separate for now?
I think some of the stuff that's offered would be for that demographic also, so, I mean, but if there was something specific that you were looking for, you know, right?
So I wonder if this category isn't...
Something outside
Is there something
sports and-
specific that you're talking about?
No, just
Those
more
types of
for kids,
programs.
In general?
yeah, right.
Well, to Bill's point of his day camp blows out every year.
Yeah.
One of the things that people love about Landmark School is the intercession. And Landmark School is going away, but we have 12 weeks that we're going to have 200 more students that are looking for placement in your day camp. You're done. You can't take them. So how do we make that bigger and better? And where do we put them?
Am I supposed to talk?
That's what we
No, I have
know.
some great ideas of where we could put them, we just need expanded facilities to do so.
So in order to keep us moving, I'm going to say, just really quick, nod or shake your head, that we've got a category here that is expand service.
Yeah.
All right, great, we'll get that started. I've got two here in my hand that you'll have to tell me if they go together. We've got our revenue generation as pertains to our indoor spaces. We also have one that says grant funding. So is this the funding category? Is this how we're going to pay for things, or are these separate ideas?
Grant funding can only be for build-outs, correct?
That is where most of the funds are located. The vast majority would be for development. Programs that provide other things are much more limited, but they do exist in smaller quantities or dollar amounts.
I think those go in non-tax revenue.
Non-tax revenue, interesting. Do we have anyone for non-tax revenue? No? Just one?
As good a title as any, right?
All right, we'll go with that for now. I do want to come back to this one here, which is, I still think it says it's either picnic areas or public areas. I'm not sure if that one's getting claimed or not.
Doesn't look like it.
Well, where did it come from? Do we have a spare sticky in our box just for fun?
You didn't write that, did you?
Picnic areas. Pavilions, picnic areas.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Let's put that with pavilions for now. If we don't have anyone, that's all right.
Under other facilities.
No, revenue, you can look at the person who spelled it right. All right, so we're getting close, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. So the next thing we're going to do is Max is going to hand out some dots, and we're going to vote on the priorities. But before we do that, while he makes the round, let's just go through our categories one more time, make sure that we still think everything's in the right spot. So first off, we have new/expanded indoor facility with several ideas of what that could include below that. We have several items that are on their own, taking care of what we already have. Dog park, we have expanding a service, which could require some resources in order to provide more favorable times, as well as providing options for specific groups of children. We have disc golf, we have bike park. We've gone ahead and grouped pavilions and picnic areas together. We have a pretty large item for aquatics, which includes both indoor and outdoor, or a combination of options. We have connectivity with some information about bike paths, pedestrian paths, and some of the criteria for how they might be safe. We have figure skating, not hockey, and we have the non-tax revenue item with grants as well as some revenue generation. So just by a nod of heads or a show of hands, is everybody okay with this? Or is there anybody who thinks that something is in the wrong spot or mislabeled?
Good.
All right, so I'm going to now invite you all to come up and place your dots on the two items you think are most important. You can place them on a category. If you think everything underneath it is equally important, go ahead and place that on the top. Or if you say this one piece of the category is the most important, you go ahead and put that on there as well. If you could just not cover up with text, that's really all we need. I'll be selling extra, no. Yeah, I was going to say feel free to take your time. I think you've got a pretty decisive group.
Put it on the post-it note.
Kick me on your back.
Where's Vic? Vic, you put it up so high we can't read. I can't read. Oh, I'm sorry.
Put it on the connected, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care as long as it's Vic. Yeah, I can't reach
You can't change your vote.
No, we're moving.
Put it on the post, you vote twice.
It's Chicago.
Put it on the wall. You're allowed.
Yeah, you're allowed.
Really vote off.
They wanna put this one back around the right.
Whatever.
They get the idea.
That's why I'm getting the stuff, so it doesn't pull the. I didn't even vote for the two I put on here. Oh, the I-3, good.
You had to bring up revenue.
Revenue?
The whole chart.
What?
Revenue, lack of revenue.
I'm gonna be the only person who voted first for this.
All I said was, let's turn the barn into a revenue getter. I mean,
Can't do any of it.
and the other one is let's maintain what we got.
I figured that was.
You figured that.
I mean, it's so earthy, I mean, of course you gotta maintain what you have. And there's a
The whole
cost
thing
to
is,
doing
you
that.
want this, you want that.
Right.
I'll vote for an indoor water park and all that. Referendum.
We're trying.
What?
Yeah, what does that stand for?
You don't wanna
I have a feeling it's not the traditional definition of PTSD.
pretty tired of stupid Democrats.
All right, has everyone had a chance to come and vote? All
It's a
right.
nonpartisan meeting.
All right, thanks, everybody. So, looking at our results, we have a couple things rising to the top. I believe we have the most votes here on the aquatics category with 2, 4, 6, 8 votes here, followed up by 6 on connectivity, very closely followed by 5 on the new and expanded indoor facility. And that just leaves non-tax revenue with 3 and a tie for pavilions and expanding service with 2 each. So this is where we're going to start wrapping up for the night. This was our last step for our Connect phase. So from here, now we have the really hard job, which is we've seen what people are asking for. We've seen a few items start to come to the top that seem to be pretty high priority. Now we have the hard job of working with staff to figure out how you might be able to accomplish some of these goals. So in the next couple weeks, we'll be reviewing all of the results, coming up with those goals and some strategies for how you might be able to implement them. Eventually, we'll be bringing those back with you and making sure that we also are putting them in a calendar that is achievable and actionable for you moving forward. So with that, if there's any last questions, I can answer for you. Otherwise, we'll take a quick photo of the results. We'll collect your note cards for review, and we'll let you get on to the rest of the agenda. I would just like to say again, thank you for your time and for your attention. Especially, I can tell you all read it in advance, and that was much appreciated. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You're right.
That's all right.
We got more things to do here, my friend. Done? No.
Really want to go?
No, I said if you guys want to talk about any of the things
No, I got plenty of work.
there. Stacking them up for you. It's like menus at a restaurant.
Can you read the second
Gathering
one
all
and
the
let us know what she put down?
Huh?
I said, can you read the second one and let me know what she put down? All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is staff reports. Is there any staff reports? Bill, Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, our Bands, Brews, and Barbecue is complete.
Yep, Bands, Brews, and Barbecue is complete. Fireworks happened this weekend as well. So everything went smoothly. I think our attendance overall the weekend wasn't great. We didn't have, again, the greatest weather. Seems that's been a trend this summer. So we'll work with the Rotary Club and see after the action if there's anything that needed to be corrected on their side. But I appreciate all their assistance in making that fireworks show happen, having all the food vendors out there, having the tents in place, having the volunteers in place. It was a huge asset to be able to provide more of an experience for those that did come out to the show. And then we do have our next Saturday sunset concert at Miller Point, the free community concert. That's this Saturday from 4 to 9 at Miller Point Park. And then the only other thing that I will say, because it's been something we've worked on for 20 years, is the power pole behind Bimbo's was removed last Friday. So that's been a long process to get that done, and get all those lines removed and placed underground. All the power was transferred last week, so there was no issue. That was a big worry of transferring power to all those businesses. They were down for about half an hour. Everything went great. So as much trepidation as we've had over the course of that project, it's not complete quite yet, but it's gone very smoothly, and that was a huge step. So if you're out driving around, just take a look at that, because it really makes a huge difference back there.
Any other staff reports? Ross, go ahead.
I would just like to thank council members who provided comments for the comp plan or stopped in to have a discussion. We are meeting with the consultants on Thursday, so if any of you have any additional comments, or those of you that maybe didn't supply comments, want to supply comments, if I could get those by Wednesday afternoon, so we can share those with the consultant. The plan here moving forward is to have a September planning and zoning hearing where they present to planning and zoning, and then, possibly come in October for city council, discussion and adoption. So, that's for the downtown plan and the comp plan.
Thank you. Any other staff reports? That's it. I have no mayor's, report. City council comments? Alderman Cook?
When does the parking lot on Main Street get going?
This week,
Is it? Okay.
that's the plan.
Also, what do you do with Ross, what do you do with the used vehicles that, since you're getting 2 new ones? Do they, get traded in, or?
There's a couple of, you guys have been in charge of that normally. I turn those over to Chief or to Public Works. We've been
sending them to auction.
Okay. How many miles have they gotten on those vehicles?
Well, I have a pickup truck that I'm replacing that probably has about 35,000 miles on it, but it's like a 2003, so it's, yeah. Actually, it might even be like a 96.
Yeah.
And it's completely rusted out, so I mean,
No, what I'm just asking, how many miles do you normally put on it?
it's about
in a year?
35,000
10?
miles on that truck.
There's only 35,000?
Yeah, primarily it's a plow maintenance truck for City Hall, and then it goes and, when we have projects here at City Hall, it goes to Home Depot and stuff, so it's not,
Heavily used.
right, that's why it's a single cab, it's bare bones truck, there's nothing.
Well, what I guess what I'm getting at, is it employee where they take them home with them and all that, or is it strictly at the shops?
Nope, strictly stays here.
Okay. Let's see what else.
Any other Alderman McClatchy?
Sure. The Pearl Street Market was rained out, and we're gonna reschedule it for September 26th, and so we're just adding an extra day on the schedule. So that was okay.
Any other comments? Alderman Glab?
Yeah, I just want to comment about the gentleman that brought up Landmark tonight. I was saddened to hear that the city doesn't really have anything to say about the schools, and I think to some extent we do have something to say about it. We are the leaders of the community. We're supposed to be. And if the schools here are part of the puzzle that we try to put together. We can do all the amenities we can that we want as far as parks, and we can build up our commercial base and everything else. But one of the biggest things of our community is education of the kids. That's what people come to this community for. And if they're not providing the best education, then we need to say something to them. I think, if nothing else, I think a good discussion. I mean, I need to see that we're, the gentleman that was here, or the comments I've heard in the past, say too much against the board as much as the administration there and where they're going. And I was at the April 9th meeting when they took and they allocated $70 million to spend in all the other schools. I don't know where they got $70 million. They saved it up real well. Well, that was my tax dollar. And then three weeks later, I get a slap in the face with a new tax bill that shows another $100 going to that district. But all I'm getting at more than anything else, again, I've mentioned that in the past, and that's the fact that rents are too high. People are having a hard time making their notes because the taxes are getting higher and higher in this city and possibly in the county. And I think to some extent, I'll bet you our grammar school district's probably the highest percentage of taxes in the county. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, 48% of your tax. And I think to some extent, we need to have some kind of discussion with the school boards and an open round table with the city council. I wouldn't have a problem talking to them out in the public because I think it's a, disaster waiting to happen down the road. We can only afford so much in this, community, and, it just seems like, the amount goes up, the services are going down. At that April 9th meeting, it pretty much sounded like, all the administration wants to do is have a cookie-cutter, school district where every school's the same. Well, every kid isn't the same. And the opportunity, the best, education in District 15, the best results have been with all this all around year-round schooling, and maybe there's certain people that just don't like it, and they're afraid it's going to expand, but now they want to do away with it. And I think to some extent as well, we've got a landmark building there that if they do decide to close it, what's going to happen to it? And what has the city got to say about it? I mean, we do have it landmarked, do we not, as far as protection?
That building is, Landmark did plaque that building, right? It hasn't.
They didn't go through the proper.
Right.
So, the landmark. So that the ordinance we have, where the ordinance that was passed, where there's protection to the buildings, came up lots later after the landmark school was plaqued. So you'd have to argue with attorneys about, this was passed way before this ordinance came about. Did that go through the proper procedures? And then, when you talk about proper procedures, so I did some research on this when people asked me to look at the school thing was going on. All of the other buildings, even before we had that fancy ordinance come through, the Landmark Commission made a vote, let's take it to the council, and they brought it to the council, and the council said, sure, let's plaque it. Like, that's all that happened, right? But with the school, the Landmark Commission, that I can never find in any of the minutes, never actually voted to plaque the building, and they never brought it to council for approval. I just see that in the minutes, somebody said, hey, we went out we put a plaque out at the school for its 100th birthday, or whatever it is. They never voted on it themselves, and they never brought that to the council for a vote. So, someone just threw a plaque out there without anybody's approval. So, you could argue this wasn't done properly. And so I'm not a lawyer to say what's right and what's wrong if it's protected. I'm just telling you that's what happened with that plaque.
Well, all I got to say is, I want to see, Alderman McClatchy here with his chains on the building.
Can I follow up on that, Monty?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or whoever. So is it too late to have it plaqued and passed by the city council?
So no, anybody can go through the process. There's an application you fill out, it goes to the Landmark Commission, the Landmark Commission holds an official hearing. And that's what we did on the ones that were done properly. There was a hearing with the Landmark Commission, they voted yes, bring it forward to council, the council passed an ordinance, an official ordinance, and it's done for 3 buildings. The 3 most recent black buildings that was done. So somebody could apply now and say, hey, the Landmark School should be, they could go through the process and it can come to you guys and you can do it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, any other city council comments? Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second, Alderman Bassi.
I'll second.
Thank you. Monty, please call the roll.
Was it Alderman McClatchy that made the motion?
Yes.
Alderman McClatchy.
Yes.
Alderwoman Bassi.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller.
Yes.
Alderman Cook.
Yes.
Alderman Davis.
Yes.
Alderman Glab.
Yes.
Alderman Santee.
Yes.